Hey, Jennifer, and everybody else. I am telling you, this is the single coolest thing on the internet at the moment. That's the way I feel about it. Because, oh my god, Karl Lagerfeld has got nothing on us. This is real here. This is so real that we're both having issues figuring out how to do it and how to talk about things and what to say and you know, we'll get there. I am enjoying myself hugely every step of the way. So I listened to your VR just now for the second time, hoping to, be capable of aligning more to what it is that you're saying. Also, um, I get that I'm not supposed to feel overly, you know, responsible or anything. I get it. I get it. You're a sovereign human being, and so am I. So I'll get upset if I want to. I mean, you just have to make it up as you go along. And I suppose uh, at this point, it's rather interesting to me that you are a Cancer because you said so, and in context with the elements and all the rest of it. Let me point out that every human being, every animal, every living creature embodies all four elements, whether it is completely consciously or dominantly, in whatever way. They're all there. They're always all there. So, you know this, of course. Um, Being a Cancer and me being a Leo, that sort of makes me realize, I think, or at least I had a thought, that uh, the way we handle control is different. I would say that's a big difference in the approach, whether in the approach of the fire signs versus the approach of the water signs. The fire signs are more about control than the water signs, just generally speaking. So if I have, what was it, Neptune in Scorpio, which is my position, my natal position, okay, that is a different thing from having Neptune in, Libra or Sagittarius. Then every time the elements are really important, but I do have, um, you know, Mars in Cancer, Moon in Aries, and a lot of other stuff going on. Uranus in Virgo. So the elements, what I'm trying to say here is that the elements are all being tapped, they're all being used to some extent. And that brings me to one other part that I thought might be fun to, to just help the discussion along and the conversation. The how, as to how I do this stuff and the approach that I have. And because we're both of us, I think, getting to see that our approaches are rather different. And that's completely cool as far as I'm concerned. It's just that I feel like you are adding to my experience and I am apparently adding to your experience, which is excellent. Okay. This is one of the cool aspects of this whole operation is neither of us is telling the other what to do or that any part of what you're doing could be done better even, or there is no such thing. It's just, this is what I have learned. And speaking for myself, I am realizing once more that the way I grew up has really led me to this particular type of this way of working, and in particular regarding meditation and everything around it. So the perception of energies and the working with energies and all the rest of it. It is the way I go about this is, I suppose it's taken me 40 years to get to this And it's also been, a lot of it has been my choice, my preferences that guided me. But a huge chunk of how I go about my, about all these things and the conclusions I come to, the way I think, all of it, it really stems also from my upbringing. Because here it is. I have said this before in a number of videos, but yeah, maybe those weren't videos that you were really necessarily interested in. So here it is again. I am a child of divorced parents. My parents had the peculiarity that they were born a day and a half apart. And so I've been, once I started, once I got going with astrology, I was particularly fascinated with this fact because they had my parents, my father and my mother, who were really very much at odds with each other, and they had a particular relational issue, obviously, that behind all that there is a sense of them having a lot of the same qualities and a lot of the same problems or processes, and fundamentally they were really strong, willful, powerful people who didn't have a career or some other type of pursuit or a context where they could express themselves properly. They were, in essence, they were mad scientists, both of them. Yeah, I think I can safely say that. I am the child of two loony bin, insane asylum, medicated, good for nothing in the world. In the 60s and 70s, their lives were a nightmare for them and for everybody else. I have recently, in the past 6 months or so, been having conversations on the phone with a foster mother who looked after me while they were in the throes of their divorce for 5 months. And from her, I have gathered a lot about their attitudes and their behaviors and things like that. Oh my God, please, oh please, I just don't want to. I don't want to be related to those two, but I am. So, everything I do sort of tend to do these days. I'm, yeah. I don't want to be filled with shame, but there it is. They just didn't take other people's feelings into consideration much because they'd been traumatized themselves, and it happens every day. Everybody's, there's people all over the world who are like this, and you don't have to have their particular astrological configuration that I, of course, am obsessing over because they were my parents and so on. And in order to be this type of mad scientist. So they didn't have any science. I wish they had. Oh my God, yes. So actually, maybe I can put it like this, and it's one way of putting it. I am strongly reminded of Kate Bush's, not cloud busting? Yes. The video of Kate Bush, you will know what I'm, you know this. You're the right generation. Maybe it didn't have that much impact where you are. I don't know. It was, to me, it was the song of my life back in those days. It's from the Running Up That Hill record Kate Bush put out in, I don't know, halfway through the 80s somewhere. And there's a cloud busting song where you can see her as a supposedly young son of a scientist who makes a rain machine and all that. I'm reminded of that because it was like that. It was like it could have been my own life. And my mom was still alive back in those days. I didn't see any parallels because I couldn't think outside my box, which was yay big. Because my mother, okay? I'd grown up with my mother. When the song actually came out, I stayed with her father for a couple of years because I had started my studies in Amsterdam, studying English Lit at first, and like linguistics, and afterwards literature. And then that song came out. My mother should have gone to India. My mother should have done something else besides sit at home and be miserable and worry by herself. She did try to go find solace, especially because she was an invalid, so she couldn't really get out of the house much. She could look after herself to some extent. And after I left to go study, she she traveled to the Caribbean and she stayed in Miami for a while, Miami, Florida, yes, where I visited her for Christmas at one point. And she went to Haiti. I seem to recall. I don't know. She's been places that she went places that I haven't really known about all that much. She only told me whenever we met again, and of course we phoned regularly, but it wasn't the intense type of interaction that you would have, that I certainly would think would be normal nowadays. It wasn't like that at all. This was in 1980, I don't know, 86, 87, thereabouts, and she had been by that time, since the divorce, which was in 74 or thereabouts, in between those years, she had been meditating, and she had a couple of books about yoga and meditation and chakras. Just a very few books, actually. She didn't really shop for any more. She was an avid reader of the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads that she had, a couple of copies, a couple of volumes, smallish volumes of, and she just read those end to end constantly. And she was essentially very much a mystic. And she got into contact with some type of Kundalini Shakti expression that was important to her. And she didn't have anything else. She had no social life to speak of because of, moving house, moving around Europe, 1 year here, another year over there. And she never really got into contact with people. She was really very shy, a very shy and socially awkward woman, I think. She'd grown up in the 40s and 50s. She spent 4 years in a concentration camp as a kid in Indonesia, in a Japanese concentration camp. And already before that, even before that, she had a rather difficult relationship with her father. There's a lot more there. A lot of unexpressed grief, isolation, abandonment, and all the rest of it. That I can just put these words in there, and you know what I'm talking about, right? She developed in those years that I mentioned, like in the early 80s, she developed this meditation practice for herself, which was basically a Kundalini chakra type process like this, where you would end up at your crown chakra, and then you would have to, go beyond that and engage in some form of a communication with a higher level of consciousness. At that time, I think it was really many people were working on this in some form or another. And many of those people did not know of each other that they were. So it was very isolated, it was very lonely, and she talked about almost nothing else to me other than, can you go to the shop to get toilet paper, or can we go, I just want to make blah 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 tonight, and let's have, and bits and, the ordinary everyday bits and bobs. Other than the everyday stuff, my mother didn't talk about much else than, and she wasn't really a very talkative person at all. She was content to be quiet most of the time, when in fact, of course, she wasn't content at all. She was bottling up all sorts of frustration, and she should have been way more, she should have had help that she didn't get, not ever, except maybe from me. And I wasn't good at that because I was in way over my head. I was not and I was the only child, and I was tagging along from one country to another, a bit like, I just reread the book Chocolat by, what's her name, Joanne Harris, just the one volume, because I used to have the other ones, but I didn't read them anymore, so I just gave them away, thrifted them. But I each time I read Chocolat or watch the movie, I go, oh my God, that's not the way that goes. Because well, maybe it's different if you have a mom who really has this artisanal, she's very competent. Vianne Rocher in the movie also, she knows what she's on about. She's got all these talents, and she's got all these capabilities. She can look after her daughter. When of course my mom, well, yeah, she provided because she had a pension, a war pension that she'd obtained after the divorce. Only then did she find out that she actually had a right to that money. So we were fairly well off in those days. And we spent quite a bit of that time, 5 years, in France, in 2 different locations. And I learned French, and I went to school everywhere. And I grew up basically thinking that the chakra meditation business was the most important thing in the world. It's more important than money. Which it is. So afterwards, I managed to sort of complete my studies. I met my husband there at the university. We were both into English literature by then. Long story short, in 95, my mother passed away. First her father, and then she herself. And it was a very complicated business, and it was miserable and painful, saying goodbye when I didn't really know that was what I was doing and stuff like that. So there were so many things that I should have learned that I didn't learn. There were so many things that I never figured out until very recently, in the recent couple of years, really. So, which is why I'm on the tube now with all my lengthy tales. So I am quite excited that we get this conversation going nowadays. And so all this, I'm telling you this because meditating is one thing I learned how to do, but I approach it like a monk would. Meditation is not R&R to me, and I'm not saying what you're doing is wrong, huh? You got me there, okay? Because it is not wrong, it is different. And depending on what it is that you want, you get different results, okay? If you want to drive from here to Poland, you want to take a sturdy truck. It's a big distance. You want to have, diesel in the tank and all the rest of it. If you want to have a comfortable journey, you're not going to go on the bike. Oh, you can go on the bike, but it'll take you a month to get there. That type of... So there's the difference, really, in what you can use it for. I have been trained to do only this little thing. I have discipline, plenty, too much, really. I will, whenever I am, in trouble, inside or emotionally or in a relationship, I will, prod and dig until I find a solution in some way through the energies, because that's what I can do, really. That's what one thing I have trained for this for all my life. Once she passed away, my mother, I just went on the given path, really. I just kept on that path. So I just thought I should, tell you about this, because that makes it more fair, I think, more open, that you have this approach, which I think very many people have, which is not the approach of the monk at all. We do not normally out there, and I tend to forget about this because, of course, I know only the inside of my own head, really. We tend to, normal people in Western society, whatever that may mean nowadays, are into meditation whenever they do that for the R&R. They want to, people tend to normally have all sorts of their physical and financial and material situation tends to be a lot better than when you're, say, in the middle of Azerbaijan or some type of place like that. We are really rich people, and I know I speak for myself here, being Dutch. We have a colonial history, which I am recently more and more aware of, because there's a fundamental wealth that has sort of taken root in this country, and it allows a lot of people to live fairly well. So I'm saying all this because you're in a comfortable situation. Most of the normal surroundings are, there's peace, there are schools, there are libraries, there's public transport, the roads are perfect. You name it. It's almost everything in our physical surroundings, in a material place that we live in, is perfect. So our incentive to go meditate like a monk, like it's a job, like you have to, take a hammer and a chisel to your karma and work until you're blue in the face every single day of your life. No Sundays, no weekends, no nothing. That's not the type of approach that we're used to anymore. And I'm feeling that I have gotten into that type of approach because of my parents, because of my mother, because of the way she was, the way she went about things. I learned to be like that. And it makes for me that I am can be enormously limited. I can have, what do you call those things that a horse has that you can't see to the sides? Those things. Okay, I'm lost for the word at the moment. I can have tunnel vision. But I am quite. I am very motivated to get these tiny little details, and in the Shakti, in the energy work, and in all those type of things. So maybe that can be of some use to you in your approach, in the way you take what you take from what I present about the Shakti work, really. So I want to get back to that also. That will be my part 2 in this story, in this episode at the moment. Because I would like to point out again that people talk about Kundalini and Shakti a bit, mostly about Kundalini and chakras. And I said in my former VR that it is the way it is presented, is a representation that is come out of a particular culture, etc. And of course, that can still be very helpful. However, it is also a diagram. And any diagram is in fact a limitation of our view. That's one thing I would like to put to you. It doesn't have to be that way for you. And people tend to, if you go and search long enough, people will try to wrestle with the system. For example, there are diagrams on the net where people have made a drawing of, I believe it is 21 or 22 chakras, of which still those 7 that we know are inside the body, 7 are in the earth, and the other 7 are from here going up. Okay? People are pulling at the system. People are trying to, seeing whether it'll give. And to me, I don't really recognize all that much of those, but it's because my approach is so very different. I have just had to work with my type of, my process. This is my story. So what that leads me to, and what it has led me to, is this, in this past winter, I realized that along my spine were all these cold areas. And there were these areas that didn't get enough Shakti energy. Simply, that was my observation a few times, and I think that I actually recall observing the same thing for a couple of years before that. So I was getting kind of mildly annoyed with that situation. I was kind of feeling I wasn't making it happen the way I could. I wasn't going to the full potential. I wasn't eating to my full potential. You know who I mean. It was Po, the Kung Fu Panda. I'm an animation movie nut also. Yes, so I sort of went ahead figuring out how to connect this Shakti that I got to. Okay, we're going to get to the elements. Maybe it'll have to be a part 2. Maybe that's a good idea to do this in 2 parts. Okay, get the Shakti. The Shakti was there, okay, some of it, and it fluctuates. Huh? I cannot really determine how much Shakti there's going to be at any given point. It's not like I'm going to go up to level 7 now. It's not like that. It's there. It's always there, and sometimes it's more or less more or less available. That's the way I would describe it. And I just went with. I just sort of coaxed or talked the Shakti towards these cold areas, one after the other. And what I discovered was that it was a lot of work, point 1. And then once I got every single stage completed, that actually made other things possible. And it has given me a lot more life, which is, I think, what you see in me when you see me do this. Apparently there's always more going on than meets the eye, I think. And I have had I don't have that many medical problems other than more or less regular headaches and PMS type troubles. I do, however, have a throat problem where if I have stress or after I have stress, I get like a mild type of inflammation that I've had since I was 12 years old, when I had I don't know what that's called, a throat infection at some point. And it still can be very, very annoying. And the only thing that really helps adequately in the type of situation that I'm in nowadays is fresh lemon juice. So not out of a bottle, just squeeze lemon. Okay, that helps a lot because it cleanses. That's the thing that is needed right there. I seem to feel that getting the Shakti up all the way through here, it just feels really good. And I am assuming that what we get is, looking from the side again, this is the spine, okay? My chakras will actually be more or less a bit more to their expressions to the front, okay? Originating really in this spinal cord business right here. So any work that I can do to, moving upstream, so to speak, and do the work there will have an effect downstream. That makes sense, doesn't it? So after listening to your description of the things you have been through, I can understand really well why the lava was not attractive to you. But I'm afraid that the lava is the real thing. Let me just not beat around the bush here. It's a burning bush. Yes. So the thing is that you were ambushed by the bush. I'm being silly here. No, I am. The experience that you had with the lava was a bit much. It was a bit on the much side, and it should have not happened completely like this. And still, that's it. How it goes. That's just what Shakti is. Shakti is there, and it'll just, I don't know, bulldoze everything out of the way. Which is why we are supposed to be careful in this line of work. We're supposed to go one step at a time. We are supposed to keep an eye on what's going on, really. And my only real how shall I put this? The way I do it is to keep track of what feels good to me. I can feel whenever there is warmth, whenever there is a better exchange, the nature of those cold areas along my spine has improved a whole lot. The rest of my body, the rest of all this, has to catch up with that, and it takes time. We will see what happens in a few years when all, I suppose, I react very strongly, as you can see in my, little vlogs that I put up this week about the money and about all the rest of it. There have been things that have been bothering me, and I can see how some of the emotional baggage is being squeezed out of my system. And each time I think, now this is it. Now we have done it. Just like you said, Jennifer, at some point you just have, you think this is it. This is, now we are getting somewhere. And now we're going to be done. We're going to be, nah. It goes on forever. The whole story goes on forever. So I think that I'm looking back to my notes here because I had a pile of notes. A human is not limited to one element. Oh yes, controlling and the water. I suppose that you can visualize any type of this type of, what my mother did back in the day was mostly visualization, really. I don't think she was aware of the Shakti, and she was sort of in the presence of the Shakti, and that was it. Because she couldn't deal with it either. It isn't that easy to deal with, because it'll bulldoze everything out of the way if you didn't control it. And maybe that's my final point for this session. Then there will be another one, I think, if I can keep track of myself here, is that we are not supposed to be bulldozed. We are supposed to make choices, informed, sovereign choices. And that's something that comes, that type of desire, that type of attitude, that's the way I feel very strongly about this. It comes from the heart, it comes from the self. Those types of moments where you go, hang on, I need to know first. I need to know what is best for me, and then move on from there, and have other choices after that, and be free. Knowledge can set you free. Yes, I think so. So I think that's the point of the whole exercise of us being on this planet, is that we become sovereign human beings. we become fully aware of whatever it is that's going on and able to make those choices, able to make consecutive choices, make a good place for us, not only for ourselves but also for other people and for what's best for the group and all that. So I can say so many more things about this. I'm just gonna buckle it up right now because I want to talk about the theta business. That'll be part 2. Okay, see you in a bit.